Okay, so we are here today with Dr. Britt Conklin. So we're just going to kind of discuss what you do, how you got here, kind of just give us some backstory on how you landed in equine veterinary medicine in the Panhandle.
Sure, absolutely. So uh, it's a long, convoluted story, I guess I should say. But speaking to the audience that I might be talking to, I could kind of begin from where I was as a kid. So I grew up in Freona, Texas. I was a Freona High School graduate. At that time, I grew up out in the country and kind of was in an ag-related family, but a pretty poor family, a pretty compromised family in a lot of ways. And I recognized early on that I didn't have a lot to come back to, and I was going to have to work at whatever it was to improve my level of living at the time. So pretty challenging as a young kid, and I know a lot of students have that in life. I can give you just a quick example of as bad can be. I was an adopted kid. I had step family. My mother died in high school. We at one point lived in about a 400 square foot adobe home. And so a lot of challenges early on. And when you're that way and you're that poor, education is really the key to get you beyond those circumstances. You can live in them, but you actually have a choice to live beyond them. And for me, I recognized that and worked hard in high school and did well because, again, I was fearful that I was going to have to go back to that environment. So I did study hard. I worked hard. I did athletics. I did all the things, but I worked really hard. And I went to school at Texas Tech, obviously all on loans. So, while loans are not a good thing all the time, sometimes that's our only option. I had some grants, but for me, that was the beginning that I had. And started out there, got a wonderful education there, and much like high school, I was pretty focused because I was fearful. And the good Lord obviously watched over me, and I graduated from Texas Tech with a decent GPA. And while a lot of people were partying, having fun, while I had fun at college, don't get me wrong, I was in a library a lot, and you have to make choices like that if you want to go beyond what your circumstances were. So for me, that was a big push, and graduated from Texas Tech and decided, what am I going to do? I had a little bit of an agricultural background. I actually went to Tech to do agricultural engineering. I thought, man, that'd be fun to build a plow or figure out how to design a tractor. And the day I got to Tech, that program was dissolved. So I had to make it about face, and I chose animal science because it was comfortable and I knew I could do that. And by the time I got to be a senior, I thought, I'll try veterinary school. I like that idea. I actually had to go back and take some courses because I didn't have all the prerequisites, and was fortunate when I applied. I did get in the first time, so went to Texas A&M after that. And going through school, I had both an undergraduate and in my professional school at Texas A&M, I had a lot of experience with different veterinarians, working with them. Worked at some mixed animal practices, and when we say mixed, what we mean by that is they work on small animals, they work on large animals. It may be horses, it may be a camel, it may be a lizard. You never know what will walk in. And those are usually found in kind of rural and regional communities, and that's where I grew up, and so I had a lot of exposure to that, but also a lot of exposure to the production agricultural industry. And so I was really interested in how a veterinarian integrated with large-scale production agriculture. So initially I was interested in feed yard stuff and production animal health. While at school, though, I also found a way to make a living, and again, poor. And so I had some horse background, and I worked with horses through high school and college, and I found somebody that kind of took me under their wing to learn how to shoe horses, as odd as that sounds, to become a farrier. And that was a really neat trade that I could kind of work around my schedule. And so I could go to class and then go find 4 or 5 horses to shoe or do whatever needs to be done in it. And so it gave me income and a manageable income too, as far as my schedule goes. So I started doing that. Didn't think it would ever turn into anything. I was a little too cheap to pay somebody else to shoe my horses, and it was a good way to make a living. So, saying all that, through veterinary school, I continued to do that, and I recognized there was a big gap in what a farrier knew and what a veterinarian knew, and there was a lot of consternation between those two professions. There was a lot of friction because farrier truly was skilled with his hands and could evaluate a horse and figure out what was going wrong, especially in their foot. And a veterinarian oftentimes learned the anatomy and things like that, but weren't always hand skilled to do the things that needed to be done to the horse. They learned intellectually a lot of times how to do things, so I thought, man, that'd be really fun to bridge those two fields. So whenever I graduated, I decided I wanted to do individual animal medicine, not the big production, because you looked at a lot of numbers in that regard. You were looking at, how all these animals fed and their efficiencies and, the health large scale. You weren't looking at individual animals. And the only way I could work on individual animals was either be a small animal veterinarian, which means you look at a dog and you look at a cat and you look at things like that, and you're specifically tailored around that animal, or I had to do equine, and I didn't want to do small animals. So I had been in enough clinics that I just didn't think I fit well doing my nature and my character and all the things, doing small. So I decided I'm going to do large, specifically equine, because people would spend money on horses. And that's what it boiled down to. My drive all along was I've got to get myself financially stable from my background. So that's where I ended up. So again, this practice here is a little bit different than the far majority of what people think conceptually of veterinarians. You think of the James Herriot veterinarian, which you was an author of a book that, kind of work on the cut up animal or the sick animal or something sneezing or coughing or any of those things. I here am more of an investment broker. Okay, that sounds ridiculous, but I manage people's investment, and these are people that generally have funds that allow them to do fun. They're the people that have the boats and the yachts and all of those things, and they have expensive animals that do jobs that actually have a return for them. And so my job is to make sure that thing can run faster, produce another baby, can go to the rope and pin and do its job well, is not encumbered by a lameness or a problem. And so I'm a specialty practice, and what I do is specifically related around the performance of a horse and how they get around and how comfortable they are. And it really migrated to focusing on diseases of the horse's foot. And so it really got specific. So as a veterinarian, again, I know this is a long answer to a short question, but veterinarians have lots of opportunities. And on the general sense, a veterinarian, you're right, is going to take care of animals that come in the door. But you have the capabilities of getting very, very specific in veterinary medicine too. We have people that are just surgeons, or they just study internal medicine, or they're an emergency and critical care veterinarian. So they can really be specific. For me, I'm very specific in equine podiatry, if you want to call it that. And that's really just the study of the horse's foot, its function, and then combining that with a skill set from a farrier of being able to develop, manufacture, and fix the problem in a horse's foot from that farrier aspect. And there aren't many of those around. It's a very interesting pool of people. There may be a dozen to 20 veterinarians that do a lot of footwork in the United States. So it makes you an important asset to the equine industry at times.
Specialized.
That's right. You're fairly highly specialized. So that's where I got where I was. It was a lot of work, and again, it started off with some pretty rough beginnings, but it was continually focusing on what could be, in a lot of ways, again, working to not go back and replicate where I came from. I wanted something different.
You didn't want it to shape you.
I did not. I did not want my
To define
upbringing.
you.
I did not want my upbringing to define me. I wanted to be able to define it. And that's where we are in America. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but we're in a great country, a free country, where we have a scenario where you can do whatever you want, and if you work at it slowly over time and put in the work early on, the harvest of that at the end is great. But a lot of times we get frustrated in that day-to-day grind to get there. And for me, it's been 25 years. I mean, that's a long time for you thinking, well, golly. But if you continually do that, the payout is significant. You know, it's the little Dave Ramsey thing, live like no one else so that later on you can live like no one else. And that's where I'm at today. And a lot of people look around and say, golly, you got a lot of stuff. Well, yeah, but it didn't start out that way. And that's the story that I always like to tell, because anybody can get where I am as long as they just put their nose to the grindstone, go to work.
And see a need and meet the need.
That's right. Yeah, there's opportunities out there in every facet of life. Okay, I don't care whether you're a cook, I don't care whether you're in business, I don't care whether you're a builder. It doesn't matter. There's so many things this country gives you. You got a lot of opportunities. So find the niche and move towards it.
I heard that, and then another thing I heard was there was a mentor somewhere in there, somebody that was willing to teach you.
Yeah, and very key for me, I had several along the way. I had again a very rough familial environment, but I had a family that took me under their wing at one point, which was fantastic. I actually lived with them for a long period of time, and they helped me along. But then I had some folks where I was working that knew I had a little bit of an interest, and I expressed that interest, and then I also expressed my willingness to work at it. Mm-hmm. All right, you start by sweeping the floor.
That's right.
And then you work your way up.
You mean they didn't just say, "Oh yes, he's here, do this horse's feet"?
No. You stood around and you watched and you swept the floor.
You make the coffee.
That's right. You make the coffee, you sweep the floor, you
With
open the door, you put the tools up, you organize things, and if you're interested in the other aspects of veterinary medicine, a lot of people started by cleaning kennels. All right, cleaning dog poop out and cat, and just showing that you're willing and you're a worker will move you along. And so, yeah, a mentor is great, but being willing to do the work allows the mentor to really take you under their wing. Yeah.
So, what was your very first job?
Oh gosh, well, we can go way back. So when I was a kid, I'll just go all the way back there. The one I remember most vividly was I hoed cotton. And that's a foreign term to people today. It would be like you in the 1950s saying you pick cotton, which was different. We didn't have the automation that we do now. But we hoed cotton back then, and what that was farmers would plant their cotton, all right, and cotton's a finicky plant, and the harvest of it is very finicky. You don't want a lot of weeds in it. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have all of the interesting crops that we do now, the Roundup Ready and all of the chemically advanced crops where we can spray different stuff on weeds to kill them and not kill the plant itself. So you physically had to go out and hoe the weeds out of the rows of cotton. And back then we had irrigation and pipe where the water would run in rows. And you would walk along those rows and take 1 or 2 rows on each side of you, or 4 rows depending on how clean the cotton was, and you would walk the row all the way down, and you'd start as early as you could and go until it got so hot you couldn't do it anymore, and you hoed weeds all day long. And I remember specifically my mother and I remember doing it as I was a kid for I think $3.25 an hour. And I remember working 24 hours, and I was close to $100 or over, I don't remember what, 75, and I thought I was rich. I thought it was amazing. I worked 24 hours, and I've got all this money. And my mom did that on the side with me too. She didn't have much either. And we did that every summer whenever I was really little. And then I got a little bit older, and I started working with some farmers and driving the tractor, and that obviously got a lot better when you were in a cab, a little bit of air conditioning. But I think that was the first vivid, true job that I had. Now, I don't know how good I was. Like, I wonder how many weeds I actually missed as a young kid not paying attention. But
you were willing.
I was willing, yeah. That was my first job that I remember.
What were your takeaway from that?
I think it was this. I think it was the reward. I think it was going that 24 hours, and then we worked more than that, obviously. But I just remember that first time of collecting 24 hours over a week's period of time, or whatever it may have been, and being able to turn that into your employer, and them turn around and give you money for it. I thought, wow, this is how this economy works. This is how capitalism works. You just got to go out there and hoe weeds for a while, and they'll give you some money. And I think that was my takeaway. I think a reward is done for a job well done. And so I think that's probably it.
I love that. So, were you interested in anything veterinarian related in middle and high school?
So I really wasn't. That's what's really interesting. Although I grew up on a farm, I wanted to be this big athlete, and I never had the genetics to get there. So my focus in junior high and high school was probably athletics. And actually I was interested, I told you, in the engineering. So whenever I was in high school, I was interested in more mechanical things, and I I didn't like go to FFA and get a green hand. I didn't do any of those things, which normal farm kids did. I was kind of in a little different realm. I actually liked, I remember in junior high coming to Amarillo College and doing a science fair project. I remember I really enjoyed that. And some of them were related to ag. I had a really neat science project as a kid where I studied some grasses and some different things, but I just liked that. I don't know what it was. So my focus was not veterinary medicine. I had animals, and it wasn't until late in college, almost too late in college. I told you I had to go back to get some prerequisites. It was almost too late whenever I looked around and I thought, I've worked at vet clinics. That's kind of fun. It's probably the good Lord pushing me that direction more than anything, because it wasn't like an overt desire like a lot of students have. But it fit me. It ended up really fitting me.
So it's okay if they don't know right now in middle and high school.
Absolutely.
You can be successful without knowing exactly
Absolutely.
what you
You can go to college. I promise I went 3 years of college and didn't know what I was doing. For sure. I just didn't have an idea. Now, you're pushed that way today. Okay? But I think it's important and I tell even my daughter's fixing to go to college, go get a bigger scope of your mind of what's out there versus what the little narrow region that you've grown up in provides. Go ahead and broaden your scope and then make a decision, because you may get out there and go, man, I wish I'd have done this. Some people ask, well, what else would you have done? I would have been a meteorologist. I love veterinary medicine. I'm glad I'm doing what I'm doing, but I didn't have that exposure. But I think that I love the environment, the clouds and the rain, and the old Doppler Dave Oliver. He's been doing it for so long. I mean, it was whenever I was a kid, so that's what I would have done different. But I didn't have that scope. But the point is don't feel pressured. Get a broad scope and then make a choice.
Okay, great advice. So, fast forward to today. What does your typical day look like now? So,
as you know, I do several different things. But when I am here at the practice, our day revolves around, generally, we work to figure out what's going on with horses. Okay, and most of the time here, horses show up because they've got a lameness issue. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's a leg that hurts somewhere, and they obviously can't tell us where. And it's our job to figure out where it's hurting, what part of the anatomy, and then what the diagnosis is, okay, based on maybe an x-ray or an ultrasound. We have some other advanced diagnostic tools that we use that we might refer them to, just like a person. So if you were hurt in a football game, or you were hurt at school or playing on the playground, whatever it may be, and you twisted your leg, and you could go to the doctor and say, my ankle hurts. The horse comes in, and we've got to pick up other cues from the horse to help figure out where the problem may actually be. And once we kind of localize that, as a person going in, you might get an x-ray, you might even get a CAT scan or an MRI. And horses have those capabilities now too. So once we localize the problem, then we try to determine how bad it is based on diagnostics, and what we can do to treat it to get the horse back to doing what they do. And then ours obviously also becomes focused in the foot itself, and the foot is really difficult in the horse. It's got a big hoof around it. There's a lot of anatomy in it, and we try to figure out what we can do to help that foot out as well. So
educated guesswork.
it's a lot of times it is. We've gotten it down to the science of where we're pretty good about telling you exactly what's wrong. We've advanced a lot of things, and our diagnostics have almost surpassed our therapeutics. And what do I mean by that? I can almost tell you exactly what's going on, but doesn't mean I can fix it or tell you how to treat it or have a solution for it. I might tell you you've got a tear in a ligament. Well, okay, what do we do? Well, of course, rest isn't part of it, but what should the rehab program be? Is there anything else we could put around that tear to change it, to improve it, to make it better? And we're fortunate in veterinary medicine that we're probably on the edge, the cutting edge, a lot more than human medicine because they've got so many regulations. So we do a lot of things that the human field looks at and tries to determine, is it working? Is that beneficial? Should it be something we should study in human medicine? So we're always doing that. We were probably the first group to really start out with the use of stem cells, with the use of regenerative therapies. And it's because we did it because we had very wealthy horse owners who were willing to do whatever it took to get their horse back to a performance level. And so we could take cutting edge things and apply it. And then the human field could look at it and say, did it work? Did it not work? Could it be something we could use in the human field? And it goes vice versa too. I mean, there are things in the human field that we take and try to apply to animals as well. But we generally have a lot more flexibility in what we can and can't do when it comes to cutting edge technology. So, but the point being is a lot of times we diagnose things that we really don't even know how to treat, and it can be challenging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. That's incredible. So, if you could give your 18-year-old self any piece of advice, you're talking to kids that are about to graduate.
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
So for me, it's going to be different with every kid. Every kid's situation is different. But for me, I was in a very intense, fearful environment. And for me, I think I would say, just relax a little bit. Just relax a little bit. There's a lot of pressure in life. Okay, and I really didn't have a lot of structure or a lot of help or a lot of grooming or direction to point someone to point me. I had mentors and things to kind of help shape, but I didn't have and a lot of kids are like that. I didn't have a well-to-do parent to help me say, it's okay, just chill out, just relax. And so for me, I think it would be, just take a breath, just relax a little bit, enjoy life. I was always the kid that wanted to be 5 years down the road. And my wife and I always joke about it. We always said, let's just get 5 more years down the road. 5 more years down the road. 5 more years down. And we would just work and get 5 years down the road. And now we're to the point where we're like, can we go 5 years back? We're getting old enough now. So the point at 18, I think, is just take life a day at a time. Maybe enjoy it a little more. Just relax. Yeah.
Great counsel. So this question is loaded.
Oh.
So I hear from employers all over Amarillo. I have the blessing of being able to work with lots of people in different fields that work closely with our young people. And I hear a lot of times, oh, we need to be teaching them this because they're deficient here. We need to be working here because, this is where. So my point being, this generation gets a lot of flack. I think they have a lot of strengths. Where would you say they shine, and where would you say we could work on some things?
Yeah, you talk to the old guard, and it's the same thing you hear. So whenever I got out of veterinary school, I went to work for a veterinarian, the old guard, okay, that graduated veterinary school in like the 50s or 60s. So he was an older man. And his complaint was always, this new generation doesn't work hard enough, and it's not dedicated enough. And then my generation says the same thing, that's not dedicated enough. So I don't know that it's that. One thing I do like about, and again, you're speaking to an even younger generation. I'm thinking Gen Y, Z, we've got a new generation even beyond that. But I think that the progression is in some ways a good thing. The old guard that I worked for was a 7-day-a-week man that never even considered work-life balance in his realm of any consideration. And so, unfortunately, I watched him on his dying bed. He died about 8 years ago, and there was probably a lot of regret there. And so I would say for this generation, they're a lot better about that. They're interested in work-life balance. They're interested in experiencing a lot of things, and life is not all about work. After World War II, that's what it was about. And then
Rebuilding.
it was rebuilding, and it was just total grindstone work. And I'm built a little bit that way. So I think that group is better about that. I do think they are. Obviously, they're much better with technology than we ever were. Whenever I deal with a young veterinary student or veterinarian, that they understand the ultrasound, the X-ray machine, the communication, the transformation of data and information, and even new things, new apps and modalities that can be used. We have a lot of even videography that we use to watch a lameness evaluation. We actually have sensors now that we can put on horses to figure out maybe a little more detail about where problems are. So they're much more apt to pick those things up, and probably a lot better than we ever were. So they have a lot of those positives going for them. Challenges for them, for my field, are just the fact that we are progressing as a whole away from agriculture, and the exposure to animals in that realm is so much less. So the students nowadays that come to veterinary school, they have to be taught how to put a halter on a horse, or how to read a horse's behavior, or simple things that 15, 20, 50 years ago, that was inherent in every kid that came along. So we're having to teach a lot more of the basic fundamental husbandry things that we used to not have to do that, and that's a challenge. So if it's something you're interested in, being a veterinarian, then I would say one thing that could help you, a challenge to overcome, would be go get experience. Go get experience in the basic things, okay? Know where to stand around an animal. Know how to read one. Know those fundamental things, and that'll propel you a lot further along. Yeah.
I heard from one of the CEOs that we interviewed, know your field. If you come and apply for a job, know what you're applying for. Have done your research about my organization. Don't show up and not know. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and that's a good one. Any interview, and I'll just give you some examples that I've ever done for a job that I was going to do. I did my background work, and I think that's a good thing. You better know the field. You better know the players. You better know the environment. Those are all good tidbits of advice for business. Yeah.
So when you go to hire an employee, what are you looking for?
I'm not, maybe a little different, but I'm not necessarily looking for the total skill set package. I'm looking for character traits that I know that I can build those skill sets into. So, and I have the luxury of doing that because we can develop things slower. If you're and this is a fast-paced environment, but the point being is if you're in a business, a fast-paced business, you may not have the ability to train. What I do is so specific that I just have to have the individual that has the right character traits, the right willingness to work, the right foundation to build off of. And then we build everything else into that. So I've got an employee here that's been with me for 8 years. And for example, he understood a little bit about farriery and horseshoeing. He went to school a little bit. He obviously grew up around horses, so he had the foundation. He had a lot of other hand skill sets, and he had the character traits and willingness to work. And so I took that and I built it, and he's been here 8 years, which is a long time for a veterinary technician in reality. And so that's what I like. Other people are a little bit different, but for me, I hired, and I'll give you an example. I'll give you a quote. We could do this when we do our Texas Tech deal. You know, our chancellor, Ted Mitchell, fantastic chancellor for the Texas Tech University system, said this even about academics. He said, we often hire people off of their CV, and then we fire them for who they are. And what that means is this, is if we would do a better job of hiring people for who they are, the character, the foundation, all of those structures, we could build the CV into them and not have a problem. But when you hire somebody for all of their accolades and they're a poor person, they don't have a value system that matches you, that will always be a frustrating thing. So when I look at somebody, you better have the value, the character, the foundation, and I'll worry about all those other things later. Yeah.
So to a man, every interview we've done, that's been the answer.
Is that right? Interesting.
I can teach you the skill set, but I can't teach you character.
Right.
I can't teach you who you are as a person. I can't teach you social skills. So come to me with those things, even in banking. I can teach you.
Yep. I think that isn't that neat? That, to me, that should be a relief to students and people coming up. It should just be, you know what? I don't have to be the most brilliant mind or know how to juggle before I go to the circus.
That's right.
All I got to do is I got to have the willingness and the right character. And I think that character is built at this stage, okay, at your young youth, and the habits that you make. So that's an important thing you still have to work on. Doesn't mean you don't have to worry about it, but it should be a relief that, okay, maybe I'm not in the top 10% of my class. They're looking for the right person. Okay, and interestingly enough, our model at the veterinary school is that way. Your grades have to meet a standard, and it's only a threshold. Beyond that, once you make the threshold, if you're applying, we don't look at it again, okay? It's not an overwhelming threshold, you just have to make the hurdle. And then we're gonna look at all of your life experiences, your attributes, your character, and then we'll make a decision from that. It's a little more of a holistic view, and that's the way I hire people too. Yeah.
I love that. And we kind of went through a phase, I think, in our society where we lost
Sure did.
that vision. Maybe not in the panhandle so much, but from a worldview. And I think if we can come back to some of that, it's just a great place. It's balance.
Yeah.
It's balance.
I think you're right.
So last one, and then we're going to go visit with the horse.
Okay.
Last one is, if you could give our students today, middle, high school, all over the panhandle, one piece of advice, life advice, or two, what would it be?
Life advice to me is more about becoming true to who you are, but also for me personally, it is finding my center within the reason I was made. All right, and that means for me tying it to my Creator and letting that guide me. I feel like God's got a plan for everybody, and for me, He did. And you can have a career and be successful, but not fulfill what you were created for, and that's a lose situation. What you want to do is center yourself and find out how you match the design and God's plan for you, and that's life. That's what life is about, okay? And when you do that, everything else, whether it's career or family or your future spouse or all the things you deal with, can continually be tied back to that. And when you have that centered there, it gives you the right direction all the time. So that's different than career, but it is fundamentally tied to your career. If you go do something that you weren't made to do, and maybe you're successful, you end up looking like a fish out of water while you're still got all the trappings of the fish and you look right. You're not in the environment you were made for. And we see that in life all the time. I mean, we see people that are disconnected from what they're what the good Lord made them for, and they're bitter. You've probably seen Venn diagrams, and people see them, find out what you're good at and what can make you money and what you're passionate about, and you tie them all together. Well, the center of that really is what God made you to do, and unless you figure out what that is, and a lot of that becomes figuring out who He is, you'll never be successful in all of those circles. This is just an example of a patient of ours. This horse is actually named Smurf. And Smurf has got some feet issues that he's dealt with chronically for a long time. He actually lives in Weatherford, Texas, which is right west of Fort Worth. But it's a client of mine that I've had for many, many years, and they will send horses up with different problems that they might have. So a big horse farm down there. And Smurf's an older guy. I don't know exactly how old he is. I think he's probably anywhere from 17 to 25. I don't really know exactly, but he's had a lot of problems off and on, and sometimes he'll come stay with us here and there so we can kind of work on his feet. So we'll get him in here, and this is what we call kind of our podiatry room. So it's a combination of both veterinary stuff and then farrier stuff. And so we'll take a diseased foot and we'll figure out what kind of appliance we need to manufacture to make a foot feel better. And the way we figure out what might be going on in the foot is obviously we try to pick out where the lameness is, and then we use diagnostics like we talked about. And one of the diagnostics we use, which I'll show you, is an x-ray. And we've taken x-rays of Smurf's feet. And again, this is the technology portion of it. This is digital radiography. So years ago, when I started in veterinary medicine, we had the old films where we would actually dip the films to come up, and you'd see people hold an X-ray picture up and look it through the light. And they used to have viewing stations. Well, obviously with technology, that's all changed, and this is all digital. So we actually have a plate here. And this is the x-ray plate, and we have an x-ray machine that shoots a beam through, and this picks up the actual x-ray beam and then transfers it wirelessly, which is even fantastic for horses. We can walk all around the horse and take all the pictures we need, and it shoots it to my machine here. So we took these earlier, and that's just an actual x-ray of Smurf's foot, and we can look in there and see that we have some problems. And again, things have changed significantly. You know, nowadays it's all touchpad, and I can change the lighting on it, and I can change kind of again the position of it, and focus in on some areas. And again, this is what's interesting about the equine world, at least, in that, like I said before, a lot of times the human world looks at what we're doing. So some of the equine world, it's probably been about 18 years ago, we started playing with digital radiography. And there were about 3 practices in the United States, 3 or 4, that began to get digital x-ray machines. And we would have people come in every once in a while. A doctor would say, "Can you take a picture of this person with digital x-rays, because it's so much better than my x-rays." So we got this long before the human world ever did. So probably 20 years ago is when kind of all of it started, and we started taking digital x-ray. Just so much easier, and again, we can manipulate it. So that's what we do a lot of times. We'll look at this picture, and we'll try to figure out what we can do to help Smurf out. And not only that, but also medically, we might try to figure out what medications may help him a little bit. And we try to figure out, are there any underlying diseases that may be problematic, causing his feet to be painful as well. So that's a pretty typical day for us. I mean, we'll look at 8 or 10 of those in a day, and we might shoe or put some type of appliance on 4 or 5 of those in a day.
Do you build that? Do you build it?
A lot of them are built, or I'll actually show you this too. We actually have, obviously we can manufacture what we need to, but we buy a lot of shoes too. So we have lots of different, you can look at this, we call this a shoe board. And so we can come in here and figure out at least kind of the foundational part of it, and we might add different things to the shoe itself. Obviously we would have to cut around that, but it all has to fit the foot really well. There's a lot of different shoes, just dependent on exactly what's going on the foot. They've all got like a little different shape, a little different pressure point that might be put on it. They may have support in the back. They may be open in the back. You can kind of see that. So a lot of different things that go on. There's even performance shoes in here. You've probably seen or heard of reining horses. They're Olympic horses, but they actually have shoes that allow them to slide. So this is a really slick shoe. So a lot of different, it's really funny.
Shoe
'cause
for every purpose.
That's right. You don't think about that, but there actually is. And we manufacture a lot of weird things at times, depending on exactly what the condition might be. And again, it's not just shoes like that. This one's a little dirty, but we've even got little slip-on boots for horses at times. And we have different glue-on appliances as well, which I don't have.
Britt, is that like
here.
if we're in a boot, if we're injured and we're
Yeah,
in a boot?
really similar. And we use a lot of cast too. So a lot of cast, just like you would cast a person. Use a lot of cast tape, a lot of casting material. Very, very similar. So yeah, the difference in the horse and you and I is I can force you or tell you, go put your foot up in the air and rest for the day, or put it on ice and put it above your heart and get all the swelling out. The horses, we struggle with that. So we've got to really work hard to figure out ways, not only just to put something on, but how to manage them beyond that. Do we put them in a small stall? Do we, where I was before, when we have really significant issues, we actually had horses that would be put in a sling. So they actually have the ability to off-weight their legs and can kind of rest in a sling. So a lot of different things that are out there now. And you think, golly, it's just a horse. Well, some of these horses' value are more than my entire home. It's critical that we do all we can. Some people, if they had the money, they'd fly them to the moon and let them float around. They're so valuable to get
because
over
they're
whatever.
an investment.
That's right. Yeah, to get over their foot issues because of the investment associated with it. And I don't always understand that kind of money, but that's a lot of the times what we play in. And doesn't matter. The $50 horse is the same to us as the $5 million horse. It doesn't matter to us. It's still the anatomy's the same. We're still going to work on them the same and do all the same things. It's just that person that has that financial discretion can do a lot more to try to get their horse better. Doesn't mean we always will get them there, but it's an effort.
That's incredible. Young people, anything, they get a lot of flack, I think. So if you could say, this is where they really shine, give them some words of encouragement, and then maybe this is where we could improve.
Well, my staff is older, but I have 3 high school kids working for me right now. One is actually getting paid and working. The other 2 are doing internships or school things that they're not getting paid. I think that this generation is really good with technology. They're very creative in things that they're interested in. But I think in the long run, and those things are really good, but the other side of that is technology can also be a hindrance, because if you don't learn critical thinking, if you're relying constantly on technology, I think that there are some kids getting out of vet school that they can't get to a diagnosis without technology. When you think about in the 1800s, people were making those same diagnoses accurately without any of the bells and whistles. So I think being able to, critical thinking is essential.
So put the phone down sometimes, don't Google it, even as adults. I Google poster projects.
Learn it, work it out, figure it out, be creative and think about it.
So when you're talking to a generation of kids right now that either are actively working or going to be soon. So when you go to hire, what are some of the key things that you look for?
Well, in this field, intelligence is one of the main things. Is one of the things. I'm looking for somebody that fits in with what the mission statement of my business is. I'm looking to hire. Well, I should probably go get it read because I don't really. But my mission statement basically is not word for word as it's written, but it basically is to care for all of God's creatures, animal and human, in a way that glorifies Him.
Perfect.
And our core values go along with that: honesty, integrity, kindness, self-control, joy in the workplace. Those are sort of our core values too. So I'm going to look for somebody, and basically I'm very honest about it, because if that person doesn't hold those core values, they're not going to be happy here.
Yeah.
So I look for somebody that will fit in with my core values, and probably number two behind that, or vying for number one with those core values and the mission statement, is teachability, willingness to learn. If you come in with an attitude of you know how to do it, you don't want to learn a different way, you're just here for a paycheck, then probably I'm not going to hire you. I need somebody that's willing to grow and learn, because we have a very growth mindset in this practice. We never settle for how we did last week or last month. We're looking for, okay, what can we do better this week? What can we do better this month?
So if a student wanted to follow in your footsteps, they wanted to one day own their own vet clinic, what would you tell them? What piece of advice would you say is critical for them to start thinking about right now?
You hear a lot about work-life balance, and I think maybe too much about it. But by the same token, I think, you have to be very diligent in school, because grades are a big part of being accepted into veterinary school. Because again, it's a very, very competitive. But also understanding and having other interests, and making sure that you enjoy the journey. I went to school with people in vet school that never did anything outside of studying. They didn't go to any of the gatherings or any of that kind of stuff. And they might have gotten out of school, as the valedictorian. But the person who graduated 10th in the class and enjoyed the ride still became a veterinarian, and still does a very good job, and is still very well educated and very technically skilled and things like that. So all of those things are important, but you shouldn't do it to exclusion of life.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Carlson, for being with us today and giving us your time. We interrupted you in the middle of surgery, so do we get to go see some of that?
I just have the one left, so probably not today.
Okay, well, we will.
But you're free to, look around the